All right, this is going to be a little water update on California. We've had a couple of storms recently since I did my last water update, so I'm interested to see if the situation has changed. In the past, we were mostly below average, but I'd imagine that we've actually shifted maybe above average at this point, especially along the coast. Now, as I was about to just dive into the kind of more climatological maps, some of the percent of normal graphics that we have to look at, I realized that the rain's actually not officially done at this point yet, and I was reminded of that because there was some heavy rainfall right outside my window. So could be good just to look at where the rain is right now, look at maybe a few forecast maps to see how long that's going to last, and then I am confident that there's going to be a drying period ahead. So then that will set a good stage for just transitioning out of this wet period. So that's why I want to see how we're doing with this wet period as of right now. And with the system coming in today, I don't think it's going to change the numbers that we're looking at that much. There's some heavy rainfall associated with this. You see where the front is, some of that yellowish color right there. It looks like it's directly over San Luis Obispo right now. And a few of those lingering post-frontal showers over Santa Cruz at the moment. Now there is some kind of danger with this one as it moves down into Southern California. We just picked up a lot of rainfall down there, so that's potentially going to lead to some flooding, and maybe that should be where we start here. Is look at NWS LA, and it looks like they do still have some winter storm warnings, special marine statement, and then there's flood watches from LA, it looks like, down through San Diego. So that's flood watch in effect from 6 p.m. this evening through late tonight. Flooding caused by excessive rainfall. And then I think this is the key point right here. Heavy rainfall from the previous storm has saturated the ground. There's a lot of concrete down there, so I don't even know how much could be absorbed in the first place. This will result in a much faster response, increasing the risk for mud and rock slides with this system coming in right now. So let's just track this front as it goes through. So that's about where we are right now. And then it moves down to LA. That's 7 p.m. tonight. That's going to be as it moves closer to Oceanside by 10 p.m. You notice this one's moving a lot faster than the atmospheric river that came through. I don't know what day that was. Maybe Sunday into Monday. All the days are blending together at this point. But that one just sat over Los Angeles for a long period of time. You can just see how fast that front moves through. So that's 1 a.m. Thursday. It's basically gone. And then we do have a few lingering showers. But we're mostly going to be seeing a drying pattern moving ahead. So that's the forecast throughout the rest of the day today. The front continues to move down, brings some more snow to the Sierra, brings some more rain down to Southern California, so we have a flood watch in place there. Let's see how much rain they're going to be getting. Click through. Yeah, that's a lot less than the last system. That goes along with what I was saying, where even though we're going to be looking at a lot of percent of normal values, so you might wonder, why would we even look at that today if things are just going to change more? They're not going to change much. 0.4 for Los Angeles, 0.4 for San Diego. Whereas the larger trends have been building up over weeks and months. So, I think that summarizes the forecast right there. Rain moving down through Southern California, flood watch in place. Not that much rain though, and then there's a drying period after that. So now that we've kind of figured out the forecast, now let's actually get into more of our water update. And let's start with what happened over the last 7 days. So this is from January 31st to February 6th. And that, I can't remember when I've seen the California map look like. I obviously don't look at this map every time a storm comes through, but that pinkish color, or bright purple, whatever you want to call that, if you look at the color scale on the bottom here, that's greater than 800% of normal. And you can see it's almost a perfect representation of where that atmospheric river was sitting over California for a long period of time. If you Go back and watch my last live stream that I did. I start out with the satellite imagery, which shows the atmosphere. I think it's even in the thumbnail, which shows the atmospheric river directly over Southern California. And that's exactly why we picked up so much rain down there. But what was interesting is all of California had some decent rain with this one. It looks like basically everybody is in that purple color, which is between 200% of normal and 400% of normal. Along the central coast, it looks like we were mostly above 400% around the Bay Area and the Central Valley, between 2 and 400, but that strip right around Santa Barbara through Los Angeles, even stretching down to Oceanside and San Diego. That was a lot of rainfall for 7 days. And it's been somewhat the trend over the last 30 days. So keep in mind, some of the numbers here are included in the map that we just looked at. For example, that same strip shows up on percent of average precipitation over the last month. So January 8th to February 6th. I guess that's not exactly a month, but close enough. It's interesting to see there is a little contrast. Around the Bay Area, let's see if the scale changed. Oh, the scale did change. That's a good thing to know. Around the Bay Area, it's between 150 and I'd say maybe 300% of normal. Be a little less down in the Big Sur area, but Santa Cruz Mountains certainly picked up a lot of rain. And then in the Central Valley, that's where it's a bit more of a mix. You have some places in the purple, which is more than 150% of normal. And then you have some in the green, which is a little above average. And then perhaps that's more as you get into Southern Sierra. That's going to be actually well below average. But the main thing that I noticed is from through Los Angeles down to San Diego along the coast. That's where we're in that purplish color, which is twice as much rain as you would expect over the last month. Actually, similar up here. I kind of ignored the north coast, but they've been picking up a lot of rainfall as well. That's closer to the overall trend for this winter, though, and I'll show that right here. So this is our water year. It starts October 1st, and then it's going to February 6th at this point. And this is the one that's going to be affected the least by the rain that we're picking up today, just because this is a trend that's been building up since October 1st, and a few more tenths of an inch isn't going to change this all that much. But it's interesting to look at this. So let's just kind of zoom in and take it region by region. So around the Bay Area, it looks like we're mostly in that green color. East Bay maybe more in the yellow color though. So green is going to be more pretty close to average, just slightly above average. And then yellow is going to be slightly below average. So on pace right now in the Bay Area for a pretty normal year. Then throughout the Sacramento Valley, it's kind of that same split between green and yellow and orange. So that's half of it, especially more the western side, looks to be slightly above average, and then the eastern side slightly below average. Central Coast looks to be mostly above average. We're in the green, maybe 110% of our rainfall. And what is interesting there is we have seen some flooding along the Central Coast, but a lot of the storms this year have been in that Goldilocks zone where it brings just enough rain to get us back close to average, but we haven't had the widespread flooding that we saw last year. Now, right now we are at the highest risk that we've been in this season, just because we just had such a big storm that now our rivers are a little bit swollen, and each successive storm, you can imagine, raises your water more and more, so then it makes river flooding more likely as you move forward. But that's where the drying period coming in over maybe the entire next week is really going to help. I'm going to be watching closely to see how much our river levels go down, because right now they're pretty high. Expected to even come up a little bit more with the system that came through today. But we'll see how much lower they can get before the next storm comes in. And the reason that's important is because 1 inch of rain can produce more flooding than 5 inches of rain if that 1 inch of rain comes after the 5 inches. Because if the 5 inches raises up your river and maybe it gets right to the crest but it doesn't flood, and then another little system brings an inch, then it pushes it over, and you get your flooding. So again, key message there, great drying period as we move forward. So now let's go down to Southern California. That's where you even see some of the purple down here. That's more than 150%. And then down in San Diego, it looks like we're pretty well, it looks like right along the coast there might be a little blue strip right there, but mostly green. So slightly above average. And then where we're below average looks to be throughout much of, if we just kind of did a basic generalization, it looks like it's through much of the Sierra. We are below average. So the next question there would be, check out the snowpack. So this one's a little technical. Let's just look at the simpler one first. Just to get the numbers. You know, it's not as bad as it was. 78% for the Northern Sierra, 73% for the Central Sierra, 68% for the Southern Sierra. So maybe in a normal year we would be worried about that. Oh, we only have about maybe two-thirds to 3/4. I'm trying to do some quick fractions and math in my head. 2/3 to 3/4 of the snow that we would expect at this point in time. And maybe people would be ringing the alarm bells on, oh, there's not enough snow in the Sierra. It's going to lead to drought. But if you remember last year, we picked up a lot of snow. I wonder, I don't know if I have access to last year's snowpack, but, oh, I wonder if it's the red line. Let's see. Oh, no, the red line wasn't the max. But what the point I'm trying to make is we picked up enough water last year and enough snow last year that there's little left over this year. So our reservoirs aren't in that bad of a position. And we'll look at the reservoirs in a minute. And on top of that, we still have a decent amount of the season to go. And it seems like El Nino is starting to turn on at this point. So I'm not worried about water in California at this point. If anything, the risk is more shifting towards flood potential, but then we have this drying period, so we look pretty good in terms of that as well. So maybe I'm not worried. Maybe for once, California water is actually doing exactly what it should do. Now, with that being said, I'm saying that from someone who's mostly from the perspective of the Central Coast. Obviously, there's other parts of California that have had some of the worst flooding that they've ever seen, or in recent history, with some of the rain that we've had this year. Thinking about Los Angeles down through San Diego. San Diego had its wettest January day on record last month. That led to widespread flooding down there. And then we still have a system coming through right now with a flood watch in place. So never want to downplay things, but again, there's always two sides of every coin, just as I just showed. There's the flooding aspect, but then there's also the California needs water aspect. So usually during significant storms, I focus more on the threats. And then after significant storms, we get to see, okay, the damage is done, but did we get anything out of it? And we did get something out of it because we are doing a lot better in terms of the water and snow levels than the last time I did one of these updates. So this chart, I've had it up here for maybe 3 minutes while I've been rambling. So hopefully you got to look at it a little bit. The red line is going to be your max snowpack. The bright blue is going to be your average snowpack. The light blue, or the thin blue line, is going to be your minimum snowpack. Man, that year they almost picked up nothing. What was that? 2014 and 2015 was the min. 1982 to 1983 was the max. And then again, bright blue is your average. And then thick blue is where we are right now. So there's a couple of numbers on here. You can see there's the 52, 49, 45. I'd imagine that number is for seasonal snowpack. And then percent of normal for today is going to be your 78%, 73%, 68%. And for the state, it's 73%. So it shows we're obviously below that bright blue shaded line, but not that far below. And as I mentioned, El Nino seems to be turning on at this point. And one way we might be able to see that is if we look right here. We kind of had a slow start to this winter where I even did one video when we were below average, thinking, oh man, are we okay in terms of water in California? I think that was after December. Because you can see on this chart right here, this is looking at total monthly summit snowfall per season. And it goes backwards in time, so that part's a little confusing. It goes from 2014 to 2015. Oh, that's the minimum year. You can see how minimum that was. And at the end of December, we had actually... So December is the red block here. It goes November is blue, then it goes December, orange is January, green is February. After December, you could see where we were. We were below that minimum year. So at that point, we're thinking, oh man, is this going to be a ridiculously dry winter? Where's El Nino? What's going on? But then January started to turn on. We certainly had a much better January. Looks like 64 inches of snow versus during that minimum year, their January, they only had 20. Oh, they didn't. They had 3 inches of snow. I could barely even click on it because it's so small on this. And then in February, and February's just getting started. This is what I wanted to show for showing that the El Nino is starting to turn on. February, we're already at 56. And remember all the snow we picked up last year? In all of February, they picked up 133. So if we have another 2 weeks, like the week we just had, then we'd rival what happened last year. And we're definitely above that minimum year at this point. So, if the rest of February ends up being good, and then in March last year, we picked up 163 inches, even picked up another 8 in April, which is interesting. We're not going to get to the 685 inches that we had last year, but again, what happened last year still helps us this year. So that's just the view of what's going on. You can see it's very variable as well. That's part of California. Is some years it's very minimum, then it spikes up, then it goes down, then it spikes up again. And that's just kind of how California goes. It's how we get a lot of our rain and snow from a few big atmospheric rivers. That's why they're not only hazardous, but they're also beneficial. Some are more hazardous, some are more beneficial. But if you miss out on maybe 2 or 3 storms, then all of a sudden it's a dry year. But it seems like it's starting to turn on now. And the point I've been coming back to is last year we picked up a lot. So the reason that's good is because that filled up our reservoirs, which was one thing I was looking at, like wondering how are we doing. I actually went and talked to a couple California water experts and asked them. I was like, we haven't had that many big storms yet. This is a few weeks ago, so it was before the big storms came in. I almost jinxed it in a good way. In some aspects, jinxed it in a bad way, in others, like flooding. But when I talked to them, a lot of these were showing maybe below historical average, and they said, we're not that worried. It's El Nino. We're going to see it turn on at some point. We've been managing it pretty carefully, and actually on some of these, we've even let out some water because we know there's going to be some good rain coming. And by the end of the year, we're probably going to be right where we should be. So they weren't worried. That helped me not be worried as well. And looking at the reservoir levels at this point, it looks pretty great. So you have total capacity, and then you have historical average. Sometimes looking at historical average is more helpful than looking at total capacity because sometimes they actually let water out on purpose. So if it's showing like 60%, you might think that's bad, but maybe they actually let out 20% recently because they're making room for future storms. And then one other thing to see is based on how big this bar is, shows how big of a reservoir it is. So the biggest bar, it looks like Shasta, Oroville, 125% of historical average, 130% of historical average. So we have more water in our reservoir right now than we usually do on February 6th. And then are they all above that one just made it, 101% historical average. it looks like they are all above historical average except for Millerton, Casitas, and San Luis. And San Luis was actually the one that I specifically asked the California water experts about, and they said they weren't that worried. So the fact that that is the one that's the lowest below historical average, 81%, and that was the one that I actually got confirmation from some of the people who manage this stuff that they think we're in a good position. Reservoirs, looks like we're in a good position there. So we've checked out the snow. I know usually people tune off in this part of the video because it's just a bunch of numbers on the screen, but I am always interested to see the percent of normal from October 1st to today, so our water year, for how we're actually doing for some of our big cities. So Sacramento looks to be right around average. That's going to be close to 100%. Santa Rosa, 120. What about San Francisco, 121? International Airport, they usually do get less rain. 109. Oakland, 89. San Jose, 142% of normal. My bright light is making my eyes water. Gotta readjust. Let's look at Central California. Looks like Merced, 127. Fresno, 75. Death Valley, 142. Salinas, 105. So that's come up. And the number for Salinas, I can actually confirm, is wrong. I think they missed about 2 inches of this. So the Salinas number is actually doing better than 105. I could get the actual number for us tomorrow. Then Southern California, this is where we're going to see some of the well above average rainfall that we picked up this last week really come into the equation, especially in places like Los Angeles, 192 or 196, so close to twice as much rain as what you would expect at this point in the year. Santa Barbara also picked up a lot of rain with that last storm. Now they're at 160% of normal. Obviously, they picked up too much rain too quickly, and that led to flooding in a lot of these cities down here in Southern California. But now we're above average, and we'll have a bit more water moving forward. So San Diego looks to be 129, 148, and 163. So I wish I could just quickly average all those together, but if I had to just guess, much of Southern California looks to be 150% of normal, and some places even close to twice as much rain as what you would expect. So doing a lot better there, and yeah, we're looking good in terms of water, I'd say. So there's one more that I want to look at, because this is maybe where we have the flood watch tonight for Southern California. That's maybe the top concern right now as that front moves through over already saturated soils. But then one concern that I'd always have this time of the year, especially after what happened last year, is some of our rivers. And I'll just use the river on the Central Coast that often leads to the worst flooding that we see on the Central Coast as an example. But what I'm about to say is going to be true for pretty much every river in California. So on the San Lorenzo, knock on wood, but we haven't seen even minor flooding this year. It's been below the flood stage level this entire season. With the last storm, at one point, this model was actually forecasting it to go into moderate flood stage, but then luckily we ended up getting less rainfall than was anticipated because the east wind blew in some drier air, which was fortunate for us. As you could see with the last storm, we did push up into the monitor stage, which I think was the first time we've seen monitor stage this year. And then the river comes down, and then with the front coming in today, you can see it's expected to jump back up a little bit, but there's not that much rain coming in today. And it looks like the blue line is your observed river levels, the purple line is your forecast. And whenever you see a difference between where the observed is and where the forecast is, it means the storm underperformed. It means we didn't get as much rain as what we were expecting. And that's why the river is lower than it was forecasted to be. Or it means maybe the storm's a little late and you might see that spike later. But what I'm trying to say here is if you look at where we were before the storm, it looks like we were around 0.5, and you could just think of this as flow. How much water is in the river? 0.5. And then we come up, and then you notice that after the storm, we don't go down to as low a level as before. Obviously, if there's more water in the river, even after the storm, the river is going to be higher. So then we go down to maybe 0.6 or 0.7. And then with the next system that comes in, it can jump up higher even if there's less rainfall moving in. And then it comes down again, but it might not be to as low of a level as it was before. So when I was looking at this a couple weeks ago, we were hovering around maybe 0.15 or 0.2. So it is interesting the river is now jumped up to 0.5 even before that system on Sunday. And then it looks like this one coming in today is not going to make that big of a difference. But the main thing I'm going to be watching is how low that's going to get throughout this next drying period. During Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then maybe, hopefully, even into the middle of next week, we shouldn't have as much rain. So that line will continue to go down and down. And we want it to go down before the next big storm comes in. Because if it's still at a 0.5 when the next storm comes in, then it's going to be a lot easier to jump up into that minor flood stage or moderate flood stage. So the main point I'm trying to make there is, there's kind of two main points in this overall video. Three main. So one is there is still a flood watch in Southern California. The flooding's not done yet, and I don't want to downplay the flooding that we already have had. But then number two, because of a lot of the rain that has started to pick up throughout January and February, now a lot of California is above average in terms of our rainfall. We are still slightly below average in terms of our snowpack, but we're making up some difference pretty quickly. And a couple more good storms, we could be right where we'd want to be for the snowpack. Reservoirs are looking great. So that's thanks to all the water we picked up last year and some of these recent storms and just some of the great management they do. So water-wise, we're good right now in California, I'd say. Snow-wise, we're pretty good as well. And then river-wise, the threat is increasing, but even in that regard, we have a perfect little drying period ahead of us. So it's almost like if somebody had engineered where we could be right now, if you took out the flooding aspect, we'd be in a pretty good position if you're looking at more of the long-term factors, like water supply, snowpack, and the rivers, which is something that kind of builds up throughout the entire year. So that, I think, is maybe a good place to stop with the little summary right there. People in SoCal know that there is rain coming on the way. I could throw the radar up one last time. We do have a flood watch down there, and we have seen some periods of heavy rainfall throughout the day today, so I definitely don't want to downplay that. You can see it along the front right there. It just passed through Santa Maria. Should be going through Santa Barbara pretty soon. And as we heard earlier, there's saturated soils, so could have some flooding. But it's a weaker system than the last one that came through. So that's California water update. Hopefully you learned something throughout the course of this video. I'll most likely do another forecast video tomorrow, or maybe even another water update tomorrow to see if things have changed with this front that's coming through right now. And I'll also do a short form video tomorrow, so then you can just kind of get the concise gist of what I might have just said in, 20, 30 minutes, however long this video was. So stay tuned for that, and thanks for watching. Hope you're all doing great out there.